The ballroom of the Langston Grand Hotel shimmered under a galaxy of crystal chandeliers. Gold-trimmed columns reflected the soft amber glow of candles arranged along the massive dining tables. The hum of polished laughter and the clinking of champagne glasses filled the room as the city's elite celebrated the annual Langston Children's Foundation Gala Night of Glamour, donations, and thinly veiled self-importance. Among the sea of designer gowns and tuxedos stood Emily Hart, a woman whose dress was far simpler than the others, but whose eyes carried a quiet depth that outshone the diamonds around her. At 29, Emily wasn't one of them. She wasn't a socialite, heiress, or entrepreneur. She was an interpreter professional hired to translate for guests with disabilities. This wasn't her usual environment. Normally, she worked at hospitals or community centers, helping people find their voice in a world too loud to listen. But tonight, she was here on assignment from her agency. Be professional, stay invisible, and don't interfere unless asked. Her supervisor had said, easier said than done. Emily stood near the far wall, observing quietly as servers glided between guests. She could read faces instinctively, skill honed over years of interpreting emotions without words. And what she saw tonight was the same pattern repeated everywhere: people laughing too loudly, pretending too hard, and caring too little. Her eyes moved across the room, scanning for anyone who might need her services. That's when she saw her in the corner, half hidden by an ornate floral arrangement. Stood a young girl 15, maybe 16, wearing a beautiful emerald green dress that shimmered like morning dew. Her posture was perfectly straight, her expression calm. But her eyes told another story: loneliness, frustration, longing. She clutched the strap of her clutch bag tightly with both hands and watched the people around her with an unsettling mixture of curiosity and distance. Emily followed her gaze to a tall man near the stage, handsome, powerful. Every inch the billionaire people whispered about tonight: Adrian Langston, CEO of Langston Industries, and the man hosting the event. The resemblance was unmistakable. The girl had his sharp cheekbones, the same gray eyes. His daughter, Emily, watched for several minutes. The girl didn't speak. No one approached her. Some glanced her way, smiled politely, and turned back to their conversations as if she wasn't even there. And Adrian, her father, didn't notice her at all. He was surrounded by business partners, reporters, politicians, all eager to touch a piece of his influence. He smiled, nodded, shook hands. But not once did his gaze shift toward the corner where his daughter stood alone. Emily's throat tightened. She recognized that silence, not just the absence of sound, the isolation of being unseen. Then the truth struck her. The girl wasn't simply quiet. She was reading lips. A faint flicker of realization passed through Emily's mind. She's deaf. Her heart ached. She had seen this too many times. People talking around, over and about someone who couldn't hear them, as if that person didn't exist. It was always the same. The forced smiles, the polite nods, the invisible wall built by ignorance. Emily hesitated for a long moment. She knew her role to stay professional, not personal. But something deeper stirred inside her, something human that couldn't ignore injustice dressed in a ball gown. With a deep breath, she decided. Emily walked slowly toward the corner where the girl stood. The crowd blurred behind her, their laughter dimming as her focus sharpened. The girl noticed her approach, her posture stiffening slightly. Her eyes darted to Emily's face, uncertain. Guarded, Emily stopped a few feet away, offering a gentle smile. Then, instead of speaking, she raised her hands and signed the simplest greeting she knew. "Hi, my name is Emily." For a heartbeat, the girl froze. Then her eyes widened in astonishment. Her hands trembled slightly before she responded, her movements graceful, fluent, full of life. "You know ASL?" Emily nodded, smiling. "Yes, I'm an interpreter." "You must be Mr. Langston's daughter." The girl hesitated before signing back. "Yes, I'm Clara." The name matched her perfectly, delicate yet strong. A spark hidden behind still waters. Clara's expression softened. Her stiff posture relaxed, replaced by something Emily hadn't seen all night, a real smile. "No one here knows sign language," Clara signed quickly, her motions faster now, full of pent-up energy. "They just talk a lot. I can't keep up." Emily's chest tightened. "That must be hard," she replied in smooth, fluid signs. "You have no idea," Clara answered with a small, tired laugh. "Everyone smiles at me like I'm made of glass. My father says he'll hire someone to teach me to lip read better, but he doesn't understand that I don't want to pretend to hear. I want to be heard." That single line struck something deep within Emily. She'd interpreted for countless people, but every now and then she met someone who reminded her why she chose this path. She wanted to say something comforting, but Clara continued. "I love my dad," she signed, eyes flicking toward the man still charming his audience. "But he doesn't even try. He says he's too busy learning the language of business to learn mine." Her expression faltered, and for a moment her hands slowed, her composure cracking. Emily reached out gently, signing with both compassion and conviction. "Maybe he doesn't realize what he's missing." Clara blinked, clearly surprised. "What do you mean?" Emily smiled. "Because you speak a language that comes straight from the heart. Most people spend their whole lives trying to say what they truly mean. You do it without sound." Clara stared at her for a moment, then laughed silently, a soundless but pure joy shining through her face. Emily felt a lump rise in her throat. Across the ballroom, Adrian Langston noticed movement in the corner. His brow furrowed slightly as he saw his daughter gesturing animatedly with some woman he didn't recognize. For a brief second, his conversation with the senator faltered. "Something wrong, Mr. Langston?" the senator asked politely. "No," Adrian replied, forcing a smile. "Just surprised." He looked again. Clara was smiling, actually smiling. He couldn't remember the last time he'd seen that. Maybe he should be happy. Instead, an uncomfortable pang twisted in his chest. Meanwhile, Clara and Emily had moved toward a quieter corner near the balcony doors. The muffled music from the orchestra drifted in from the main room, while the cool night air brushed against their skin through the open doorway. "Do you always work at these events?" Clara signed. "Not really," Emily replied. "Mostly hospitals, schools, and charities. I like helping people communicate, to get paid to connect people who can't understand each other." Emily smiled. "Exactly. It's kind of beautiful." Clara signed softly. "It is," Emily agreed. "Sometimes the smallest conversation can change everything." For a while, they just stood there, two people from completely different worlds, speaking a language that most people in the room couldn't understand. Clara turned her head slightly, watching the glittering crowd. "Do you ever feel like you don't belong somewhere?" "All the time," Emily replied. "But I've learned something sometimes. The places where you don't belong are the places that need you most." Outline made Clara pause. Her eyes shimmered under the chandelier's reflection. For the first time in years, she didn't feel like the quiet shadow in her father's world. At that same moment, Adrian approached, his confident stride cutting through the crowd. He looked uncertain, an emotion rarely seen on his face. Clara turned. Noticing him, and her hands froze mid-sign. "Clara," Adrian said aloud, his tone warm but awkward, as though testing the sound of her name. "You seem happy tonight." Clara didn't respond. She glanced at Emily, who subtly signed, "He's talking to you." Clara gave a polite nod and signed slowly, "Yes, Dad, I'm fine." Adrian sighed, frustration flickering across his features. "I wish you'd talk instead of." "You know." Emily's breath caught, but she said nothing. Clara's face tightened. "This is how I talk," she signed sharply. Asterisk Clara, please don't make a scene. Her eyes darkened. Make a scene? She thought bitterly. When she was silent, they ignored her. When she signed, they called it a scene. Emily could feel the air thickening. She gently stepped between them, her hands calm and deliberate. "Mr. Langston," she said softly. "She's not making a scene. She's communicating." It turned toward her, surprised. "You can understand her?" "Yes," Emily replied, her tone respectful, yet steady. "And she understands far more than you think." For a moment, Father and interpreter locked eyes to worlds colliding. Adrian opened his mouth to respond, but hesitated. He looked back at Clara, then at Emily again, and confusion warring with pride. Without another word, he gave a tight nod and stepped away. When he disappeared into the crowd, Clara's hands trembled slightly. "Thank you," she signed. "For what?" Emily asked. "For seeing me?" Emily smiled softly. "You were never invisible. The world just needs to learn how to listen." The orchestra swelled in the background, the melody rising like a promise. That night, for the first time in years, Clara felt heard not by sound, but by understanding, and Emily knew this was only the beginning. The following morning. The golden sunrise spilled gently over the glass walls of Langston Tower, Adrian's iconic skyscraper overlooking Seattle's waterfront. To the public, Adrian Langston was the face of success, a man who built an empire from nothing. He couldn't stop thinking about last night. He had hosted hundreds of galas before, smiled for cameras, signed donation checks, made powerful speeches, yet one image from the evening replayed endlessly in his mind. Clara smiling. Not the polite, practiced smile she wore for photographers, but a real one. And it wasn't because of him. It was because of that woman, the one who signed, the interpreter. For years, Adrian had told himself that he was doing everything right, providing the best doctors, the best tutors, the best therapists money could buy. He told himself that Clara was fine. But seeing her connect with a stranger in a way she never had with him, it shook something deep inside. He picked up his phone, hesitating before calling his assistant. "Find out who the sign language interpreter was at last night's gala," he said quietly. "Her name is Emily Hart, sir," his assistant replied almost instantly. "From the Northwest Interpreting Agency." "Why?" Adrian paused. "Just send her contact details to my office." He didn't know exactly why he wanted to see her. Maybe curiosity. Maybe guilt. Maybe both. Meanwhile, Memely woke up to the soft drizzle of Seattle rain against her apartment window. The world outside was gray, but she felt oddly bright inside. Last night's encounter with Clara had stayed with her, the connection, the joy, the unspoken understanding between them. She poured herself a cup of coffee and opened her laptop to prepare for her next hospital shift. That's when an unexpected email popped up. From Langston Industries, subject, meeting requests, interpreter services, dear Ms. Hart. Mr. Adrian Langston has requested a private meeting with you today at 2 p.m. regarding potential communication support services. Regards, Langston Corporate Communications. Emily blinked in surprise. The Adrian Langston. She almost laughed. Why would a billionaire CEO need to see her? Was he angry about last night? Grateful? Curious? Regardless, she accepted the meeting at Langston Tower, 2:00 p.m. when the elevator doors opened onto the top floor. Emily stepped into a space that felt like another world, polished marble floors, walls of glass overlooking the city, art pieces that probably cost more than her entire apartment building. Adrian Langston stood by the window, his back to her, hands clasped behind him. He turned as she approached, his expression composed but his eyes tired. "Miss Hart," he greeted politely. "Thank you for coming." Of course, Emily replied, trying to match his professionalism. "How can I help you?" Adrian gestured toward a chair. "Please, sit." He sat opposite her, studying her face carefully before speaking. "You were speaking to my daughter last night?" Emily nodded cautiously. "Yes, sir. She seemed isolated. I just wanted to make her feel included." Adrian exhaled, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "I know Clara. She isolates herself." With respect, Emily said gently, "She doesn't isolate herself. Mr. Langston, people isolate her by not trying to communicate in the way she understands." Adrian's jaw tightened. "You think I don't care about my daughter?" "I didn't say that." Emily's tone remained calm. "But I do think you might not realize how much she needs something you can't buy." His eyes narrowed slightly, not in anger, but in thought. No one spoke to him like that. Most people flattered him, feared him, or agreed with him. This woman didn't. "What do you suggest I do?" he asked after a pause. Emily leaned forward slightly. Learn her language. I don't have time for that, he said automatically. Running my company, she interrupted softly, but you have time to lose her? The silence between them was heavy. For the first time in years, Adrian had no immediate reply. Later that evening, as Clara sat on her bed, sketching in her art journal, she drew the ballroom scene from memory, the chandeliers, the people, and Emily's kind face. There was movement in the lines, energy in the hands that signed. She smiled faintly as her pencil glided over the page. A knock at the door startled her. Her father stood there, uncertain, holding a small notebook. She looked up, surprised. "Can I come in?" he asked. She nodded cautiously. He sat beside her, opening the notebook. Inside were scribbles, shaky drawings of hands forming letters. A, B, C. "Hello, how are you?" Clara's eyes widened. He smiled sheepishly. "Emily gave me a lesson this afternoon. Said I should start with the basics." Tears welled in Clara's eyes. Her hands trembled as she signed slowly. You're learning sign language." Adrian nodded, signing clumsily, yes. "For you." The signs were messy, awkward, but they hit her heart like a thunderclap. She laughed and cried at the same time. For the first time. They communicated not perfectly, not fluently, but genuinely. "You're terrible at it," she signed teasingly through tears. He chuckled, missigning a word that accidentally came out as potato. Clara burst out laughing, and he laughed too, a sound that felt foreign and healing all at once. Days turned into weeks over the next few weeks. Adrian met with Emily twice a week for private lessons. It was humbling for him, a man who commanded thousands of employees, now struggling to remember handshapes and grammar. But Emily was patient. She saw something rare in him, not the cold billionaire from tabloids, but a father trying to rediscover a language of love he'd forgotten how to speak. During each lesson, Emily noticed subtle changes. His tone softened. His questions about Clara became more heartfelt. He started asking, "How do I tell her I'm proud?" Or "How do I say I love you?" Emily would demonstrate, and he would repeat awkwardly at first. But with sincerity, one afternoon, as they practiced, Adrian sighed. "Do you have children, Miss Hart?" "No," she said softly. "But I had a brother. He was deaf too. That's why I became an interpreter." People ignored him, until it was too late. Adrian looked at her, realizing her empathy came from somewhere deep and painful. "I'm sorry." She smiled faintly. "Don't be. Just make sure you don't become someone else's too late." A silent rebellion at school, Clara started to change too. She carried herself differently, more confident, less guarded. She began teaching her art teacher a few basic signs. And soon other students became curious. Within a month, the art club decided to create a silent voices exhibit, a gallery showcasing works by deaf and hard of hearing students. The goal, to show that silence could be powerful, not broken. When she told Emily about it during one of their meets at a cafe, Emily beamed. "That's amazing, Clara. You're turning your silence into art. It feels good." Clara signed with pride. "Like I finally have something that's mine." "You've always had it," Emily replied warmly. "You just needed the world to notice." Adrian's transformation. At the next board meeting, Adrian surprised everyone. Normally stoic and data-driven, opened his presentation with a statement that no one expected. "Before we discuss projections," he said, "I want to talk about communication." He paused, scanning the room. "For years I thought success was about being heard, the loudest in the room, the one with the final word. But I've learned that true strength lies in listening. Even when no one is speaking." The executives exchanged puzzled glances, but something in his tone made them listen. Adrian had changed. He wasn't just speaking about business anymore. He was speaking about life. The night of the exhibit, the Silent Voices art exhibition opened to a full crowd. The walls were lined with paintings that seemed to pulse with emotion, bold colors, sharp strokes, a visual symphony of silence and expression. In the center was Clara's masterpiece, a painting of two hands reaching for each other through a wall of glass, one large, one small, the hands about to meet at the bottom. She had painted 2 words in elegant cursive, finally heard. Emily stood beside her, filled with quiet pride. Adrian arrived moments later, dressed in his usual tailored suit, but tonight, he seemed different, softer, present. He approached Clara, his eyes glistening. She turned to him, heart pounding. He signed slowly, deliberately. "I am proud of you." Her hands flew to her mouth. Tears streamed down her cheeks. She signed back, trembling. "You learned that?" "Every word," he signed, smiling. "For you." People nearby turned to watch, realizing what was happening. A billionaire and his daughter communicating without sound. Yet, saying everything. Emily watched from a distance, her heart swelling. She'd seen many reunions through language, but this one was special. Asterisk as the applause filled the gallery. Clara took her father's hand and pulled him toward the center of the room. She looked at Emily and signed playfully. "This is all your fault," Emily laughed. "I'll take that as a compliment." For the first time in years, Clara and Adrian weren't separated by silence. They were connected by understanding, by love made visible. That night, as the city lights twinkled across the water, Adrian wrote in his journal, something he hadn't done in years. "Success built walls around me. My daughter tore them down with silence. And the woman who helped us speak, she reminded me that some of the most powerful conversations have no sound at all." He looked out the window, where Clara's laughter echoed. The city of Seattle seemed to hum differently that spring. For the first time in years, the Langston estate, once known for its cold, untouchable grandeur, felt alive. Every morning, sunlight streamed through the vast windows, catching the rippling surface of Lake Union below. In the kitchen, laughter not the kind made of sound, but of light. Expressive gestures and shared smiles filled the air. Adrian Langston, the man who once ruled boardrooms like a storm, now sat at the breakfast table with his teenage daughter, Clara, practicing sign language between bites of toast. "You are," Adrian signed awkwardly, fumbling with the shape of his hand. "Beautiful?" Clara giggled silently, shaking her head. "That's not beautiful, Dad," she corrected, reshaping his fingers with patient hands. "You just told me I'm broccoli." Adrian blinked, then burst out laughing, the deep, genuine kind that startled even him. He hadn't laughed like that since his wife Mariah passed away. Clara beamed, her hands flying quickly as she signed, "You're getting better." "Though teacher good," Adrian replied proudly, pointing toward her with exaggerated flair. "Teacher the best," she teased, tapping her chest. The moment was simple. Yet for Clara, it was everything. She no longer saw her father as a stranger speaking in a foreign world of noise. He was learning her world now. Slowly, imperfectly, but with heart. The unexpected call at the same time. Emily Hart's life had changed too. Her work as an interpreter flourished after the Silent Voices exhibit. Invitations poured in. Schools, nonprofits. Even media outlets wanted her to speak about inclusive communication. But the fame didn't interest her. What did was purpose. And teaching Adrian and Clara had given her more purpose than any paycheck ever could. One afternoon, as Emily was preparing for her next hospital appointment, her phone rang. The caller ID read, "Langston Industries." She smiled and answered, "Good afternoon, Mr. Langston." "Emily?" Adrian's voice came through, more relaxed than before. "I have a, unusual request," she said, curious. "I'm hosting a leadership seminar for my executive team next week about empathy and communication. I was wondering if you'd help me present something." "Something real," Emily blinked. "You want to teach your executives?" "Sign language." "Not just that," he replied thoughtfully. "I want to teach them how to listen. You once said people isolate those they don't understand. I want to change that, at least within my company." A smile spread across her face. "I'd be honored." A lesson in listening a week later. The top floor of Langston Tower buzzed with confusion. Executives in sharp suits gathered around conference tables covered with notepads, coffee cups, and nervous energy. When Adrian walked in, accompanied by Emily, The chatter died instantly. He stood at the front and said, "We'll start differently today. No numbers, no charts. Just hands." Emily stepped forward. "Today you'll learn something that most of us forget in business, how to communicate without speaking." She began with simple words. "Hello, thank you, please, sorry." The room filled with hesitant laughter as powerful men and women tried to mirror her movements. Struggling but intrigued, Adrian joined them, signing slowly beside her. The executives exchanged glances, their formidable boss now humbling himself to learn something entirely new. Emily smiled. "You see, the challenge isn't your hands, it's your patience." By the end of the session, the energy in the room had shifted. They weren't just learning signs, they were learning empathy. When it ended, Adrian stood before them and signed, "Clearly, powerfully, understanding is the real language of success." Applause erupted. For once, Adrian wasn't applauded for profit, but for growth. Clara's new world at school, Clara's life blossomed. Her Silent Voices exhibit caught the attention of an art foundation that offered her a scholarship to study visual communication and expressive arts. For the first time, she felt seen not as the billionaire's daughter, but as herself. One afternoon, she sat in her art room, surrounded by paints and sketches, when her teacher, Mrs. Rivera, approached with a letter. Clara read it carefully. Her heart skipped a beat. "You've been invited to present your work at the International Youth Art Festival in Paris." Tears welled in her eyes. She signed excitedly to Mrs. Rivera. "Paris? I can't believe it." Mrs. Rivera nodded warmly. "You earned it, Clara. You have a gift, a way of painting emotions without words." That evening, Clara rushed home to show her father. He was on a video call with investors when she entered the office, holding the letter like a trophy. "Dad," she signed urgently. "Look." He stopped mid-sentence, excused himself from the call, and turned toward her. She handed him the letter, her eyes shimmering. Adrian read it once, then again, then looked up with pure pride. He stood, walked around his desk, and signed slowly, "You're going to Paris." Clara nodded, tears streaming. "You're proud?" He signed clumsily but clearly, more than words can say. He hugged something rare and unspoken, full of all the words they'd never said before. A shadow from the past, that same night after Clara went to bed. Adrian sat on the terrace with Emily. She had stopped by to drop off some learning materials, but he insisted she stay for tea. The city glittered below them, alive with sound and movement. Neither of them needed to fill the silence. "Do you ever think," he said after a pause, "that maybe some of us become successful just to avoid feeling small?" Emily looked at him curiously. "What makes you say that?" He exhaled. "Mariah, my wife, used to say, I built walls to protect myself from failure. But after she died, those walls just kept everyone else out, including Clara." Emily nodded gently. "Sometimes we confuse control with care, but healing starts the moment we admit we don't have all the answers." He smiled faintly. "You're wise for someone so young." "I've lived a lot through silence," she said softly. "My brother. He passed away when I was 17. He was deaf too. People didn't bother learning his language either. It broke him." Adrian's expression softened. "I'm sorry, Emily." She nodded. "It's why I became who I am. I promised I'd make sure no one else felt what he did unheard." Their eyes met. Two people who'd lost something precious, but found meaning in the pieces. Left behind, and for a fleeting moment, the silence between them was not empty, but peaceful. Departure day a week later, the Langston household buzzed with excitement. Clara's luggage was packed, her passport ready, her sketchbooks neatly tucked away in her bag. The trip to Paris was her first time traveling alone, but she wasn't afraid. Her father stood at the door, and helping her adjust her coat. "You okay?" He signed. "Nervous," she admitted, "but happy." "Good. That means it matters." She grinned, then paused, looking at him with a teasing glint. "Promise you won't work all night?" He laughed, signing awkwardly. "I'll try." "Try isn't a promise," she signed playfully. He raised an eyebrow. Fine, I promise. They hugged tightly, a silent exchange of love and hope. Emily stood beside them, holding a small envelope. This is for you, Clara, she said, handing it over. Open it when you reach Paris. Clara nodded, smiling warmly, gave her a quick hug before heading toward the waiting car. Adrian watched her go, his throat tight. Emily touched his arm gently. You did good, Adrian. She's braver than I ever was, he admitted quietly. The letter in Paris, the flight was long, but Clara barely slept. When she finally reached her hotel in Paris and unpacked, she remembered the envelope from Emily. She opened it carefully. Inside was a small folded card, handwritten in elegant script. To Clara, the world tried to silence you, but you turned that silence into art. Never forget, you don't need sound to make people listen. You only need truth. Emily, beneath it was a small drawing of two hands, one adult. One young, forming the sign for love. Clara smiled through tears. Then she looked out the window, over the glittering lights of Paris, and whispered in her heart, Thank you, asterisk. A storm back home 2 days later. While Clara was in Paris preparing for her exhibit, Seattle faced a storm, both literal and emotional, at Langston Tower. Adrian collapsed during a board presentation. The doctors later said it was exhaustion, a combination of stress and overwork. For years, he had ignored the signs his body was giving him. When he regained consciousness in the hospital, the first face he saw was Emily's. Clara, he croaked weakly. She's fine, Emily said softly, holding his hand. She's in Paris. I didn't tell her yet. I didn't want to worry her before the exhibition. He nodded slowly. Don't tell her. Let her shine. Adrian, you need rest, Emily said firmly. You can't keep doing this to yourself. I just want her to have everything I couldn't give her, he murmured. You already gave her what she needed most, Emily replied gently. You gave her you. Outside, thunder rolled. The rain lashed against the windows like a restless sea. In Paris, the exhibition the next evening, Clara stood in the grand gallery of the Musée d'Art Moderne. Hundreds of guests filled the room, art critics, curators, and young artists from around the world. Her painting, The Sound of Silence, stood at the center. A young girl surrounded by people speaking, their mouths open, but their words forming waves of color that blurred into chaos. And at the center, the girl's hands glowed in soft white light, forming one word: hope. When her name was announced, the audience applauded. Clara walked to the podium, heart pounding. She couldn't speak, but she raised her hands and began to sign, and an interpreter translated for her. For a long time, I thought silence was my weakness. But now I know silence is where truth begins. Because when people stop talking, they finally start listening. Asterisk, the crowd erupted in applause, some wiping tears, others stunned into reverent quiet, and somewhere back in Seattle, a father smiled weakly from a hospital bed as Emily held up her phone, streaming the event to him. His lips moved silently, forming words only his heart could speak. I hear you, Clara. I hear you. The soft beeping of medical monitors filled the dimly lit hospital room. Outside, the rain had calmed to a steady drizzle that painted the windows in silver streaks. Inside, Adrian Langston lay still, pale against the crisp white sheets. The man who had once commanded entire industries with a single word was now silent. His strength reduced to quiet breaths and faint movements. Beside him, Emily Hart sat in a chair, her hair tied back, exhaustion shadowing her face. She had been there for 2 nights straight. She told no one, not even Clara. She remembered his request. Don't tell her. Let her shine. So she watched him fight to recover. And in the stillness, she prayed, not with words, but with the same quiet grace she had always spoken through. Across the ocean, Paris in Paris, the light was different. It wasn't the harsh white of corporate offices or hospital rooms. It was soft, golden, like melted honey pouring across the city's rooftops. Clara stood by her hotel balcony, her award certificate clutched in her hands, her heart bursting with pride and longing. She had done it. Her painting, The Sound of Silence, had won the Grand Youth Expression Award. The crowd's applause. The tears, the smiles, she had felt them all, even if she couldn't hear them. But something inside her felt a heaviness she couldn't explain. She picked up her phone, opening the message app. Her father hadn't texted all week. That wasn't like him. Not anymore. "Hey, Dad, how are you?" She typed. She waited. No reply. Minutes turned into an hour. Then another. Her fingers trembled. She switched to FaceTime, but it rang and rang without answer. Her heart dropped. Back in Seattle, Emily woke up to the sound of Adrian stirring. His eyes fluttered open, squinting against the dim light. "Clara?" he rasped weakly. Emily leaned forward, relief flooding her face. "She's fine. She's in Paris. She doesn't know yet." He exhaled shakily, his voice fragile. "Good. She should. Stay there. She deserves this moment." "She want to know," Emily said softly. Adrian shook his head. "Not yet. I promised her once that she'd never see me weak again. Let her finish the exhibit. Then tell her." Emily nodded, though her heart ached. As a nurse entered to check his vitals, Adrian whispered, "Emily, thank you." She frowned slightly. "For what? For teaching me how to hear? Without ears?" Her eyes stung. She reached for his hand. "You taught yourself, Adrian. I just reminded you. It was possible." Clara's returned 3 days later. Clara's flight landed in Seattle under a gray, weeping sky. The wind carried the scent of wet pavement and jet fuel. As soon as she switched on her phone, it buzzed violently, missed calls, messages, and one voicemail from Emily. Her stomach clenched. She didn't need to hear the words to know. The sinking feeling told her everything. By the time she reached the hospital, her hands were trembling. Emily was there, waiting in the lobby, when their eyes met. Claire didn't even ask. Emily walked toward her, tears welling up, and signed slowly, "He's alive, but weak." Clara gasped, covering her mouth, the relief mixed with pain. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" She signed fiercely. Emily's eyes softened. "Because he wanted you to live your dream first." He was proud. Tears streamed down Clara's face as she signed, "Take me to him." The reunion. When Clara entered the room, she froze. The steady hum of machines surrounded her father's fragile form. He looked smaller than she remembered, his face marked by exhaustion, his hands resting limply on the blanket. She walked slowly to his bedside and touched his arm gently. His eyes opened. And when he saw her, they glistened. "Clara," he whispered, voice hoarse. She signed quickly, tears blurring her vision. "You scared me, Dad." He smiled weakly. "Couldn't miss your big win, could I?" She sobbed silently, taking his hand in both of hers. Her signs trembled. "You should have told me. Didn't want to ruin your moment," he signed back, clumsy but heartfelt. "You've waited too long to shine." She shook her head, crying harder. "My moment means nothing if you're not here." Adrian's breathing slowed, his hand weak but warm in hers. "You made me see life again, Clara. You and Emily." Clara turned to Emily, who stood quietly by the door. Their eyes met, one woman who gave the world soundless meaning, another who found her own through it. Healing through silence over the next few weeks, Adrian recovered slowly. The doctors were optimistic, but warned him to take it easy. Clara refused to leave his side. Every day she arrived with her sketchbook, sitting beside him as he slept. Sometimes she drew him. Sometimes she drew their hands. Entwined and signing together, Emily visited often, helping Clara translate doctor updates, teaching Adrian gentle breathing exercises in sign language. One afternoon, Adrian looked at both women and smiled faintly. "You two," he signed, "are my miracle." Emily laughed softly. "Then you must promise not to waste it." "Promise," he signed with effort, his fingers trembling, but sure. They laughed together, the air lighter than it had been in months. The letter left unread. A few days later, Clara found a sealed envelope tucked in her father's nightstand. Her name was written on it in his familiar handwriting. Inside was a letter, written long before the gala where she met Emily. "My dearest Clara, I don't know if I'll ever find the right words to tell you what you mean to me. For years, I thought being your father meant giving you everything money could buy. But I was wrong. You didn't need my money, you needed my heart. You needed me to listen, not with ears, but with soul. I wish I had learned your language sooner. If you're reading this, I hope I've finally made you proud, not as a billionaire, but as a father who finally learned how to hear you. Love, Dad. Clara pressed the letter to her chest and wept quietly, the tears falling onto the ink until the words blurred. Then she looked up at Emily, who was standing nearby, and signed through trembling hands. He finally heard me. Emily signed back softly, and the world did too. A foundation of hope. Months later, Adrian had recovered enough to return to his company. But something fundamental had changed. Langston Industries was no longer just a tech empire. Under his leadership, a new branch was born, the Clara Langston Foundation for Inclusive Communication, dedicated to supporting children with hearing disabilities, funding interpreter training programs, and developing technology that bridged sound and silence. The first event was emotional. Clara, standing beside her father and Emily, watched as the crowd applauded their mission. For once, the applause wasn't noise, it was meaning. When Adrian took the stage, he didn't speak into the microphone. Instead, he raised his hands and began to sign. Once, I thought silence was a barrier. But my daughter taught me that silence is just another language, one that can teach the world how to love. Emily stood off to the side, tears slipping down her cheeks as the interpreter voiced his message aloud for the audience. The hall fell silent when he finished. Not out of confusion, but reverence. And then came the standing ovation, a quiet goodbye letter that night. When the event ended and the crowd had dispersed, Adrian walked out to the balcony overlooking the city. Clara and Emily joined him. The city lights shimmered like constellations below. You know, Adrian signed with a smile, this all started because one woman refused to stay quiet. Emily chuckled softly, and one girl refused to stop trying to be heard. Clara looked between them, her hands signing slowly, and one father refused to give up. They stood there together, 3 lives intertwined by silence, understanding, and love. As the wind whispered through the night and the city hummed in the distance, Adrian turned toward them both and signed one final message. His eyes glistening under the moonlight, the world speaks in many ways. But the truest language of all is the one spoken by the heart. And in that moment, no sound, no words, only truth. A year passed. The seasons rolled gently over Seattle, the rain softening into spring drizzle. The sunlight breaking through with hesitant warmth. The Langston Tower looked the same from the Clara Langston Foundation had become a beacon of inclusion, inspiring schools and companies around the world. People didn't just admire Adrian Langston for his wealth. Anymore, they respected him for his transformation. And at the heart of it all was one young woman who had once been invisible. The morning of the awards ceremony, golden morning light poured through the Langston estate windows, spilling over the breakfast table where Adrian, Clara, and Emily sat together. Clara was now 18, elegant, confident, and full of quiet fire. She had graduated with honors and had been invited to receive the Global Youth Humanitarian Award for her work in accessibility and art therapy. The award recognized young people who had changed lives through compassion. Adrian, now healthier and gentler, adjusted his tie nervously as Clara teased him in sign language. "You're more nervous than me, 'cause I'm your dad," he replied with an awkward grin, his fingers still a little shaky but fluent now. "Dads worry. It's in the job description." Emily laughed softly. "He's getting good, Clara. You might have to hire him as your interpreter soon." Clara signed playfully. "No way. He'd steal all my applause." Adrian smiled, warmth softening his face. For years he had measured success in numbers. Now he measured it in moments like this. At the award hall, the Global Youth Humanitarian ceremony was held in San Francisco, a vast auditorium filled with dignitaries, journalists, and philanthropists. Cameras flashed, the hum of applause echoing through the hall as Clara walked across the stage in her sapphire dress. The crowd rose to their feet, She moved gracefully, her interpreter beside her, but her presence was what truly captivated the room. She didn't need sound. Her confidence filled the silence with meaning. "Ladies and gentlemen," the presenter said, "please welcome a young woman whose art taught the world that silence can be beautiful, Miss Clara Langston." Applause thundered. Clara smiled, her hands trembling slightly as she raised them to begin her speech in sign language. The interpreter's voice filled the hall, but it was her hands that everyone watched. "When I was younger, I thought silence was my prison. But then I realized it was my canvas. And on that canvas, I painted connection, empathy, and hope. A kind woman once spoke to me in my language when no one else would. She showed me that kindness doesn't need sound to be heard." The camera cut to Emily in the front row, tears shimmering in her eyes. "And my father," Clara continued, "taught me that even the loudest man can learn to listen when love leads the way." Adrian's lips quivered. He couldn't stop the tears that finally fell. Clara smiled, signing with elegant grace. "So to everyone watching, whether you can hear or not, remember, the world doesn't need more voices. It needs more listeners." The entire audience stood in silence, and then one by one, people raised their hands, some forming the sign for applause in ASL. The sight brought the room to tears. The quiet, after the applause later that night. In their hotel suite overlooking the glittering city, Clara stood by the window, looking out at the horizon. Emily joined her with 2 cups of tea. "You were incredible tonight," Emily said softly. Clara smiled, signing, "I couldn't have done it without you." Emily shook her head. "You would have found your voice either way." Clara laughed silently. "Maybe, but you helped me believe in it." Emily looked at her fondly. "You know, when I met you that night at the gala, I thought I was helping you. But truthfully, you helped me heal." Clara tilted her head, curious. Emily continued, voice trembling slightly. "After my brother died, I promised I'd dedicate my life to helping others like him. But meeting you, seeing how you turned your pain into power, it reminded me that love doesn't end with loss. It grows into purpose." Clara's eyes softened. She signed gently. Then we healed each other. They embraced teacher and student, friends bound not by sound but by soul. Adrian's gift the next morning. Clara found a small velvet box on the breakfast table, with a note written in her father's handwriting. "Asterisk to my daughter, who taught me how to listen. Inside this box is more than a gift. It's a promise." She opened it to find a delicate silver pendant, a heart-shaped charm engraved with a single word in sign language, "Forever." Clara smiled, tears blurring her vision. She turned to her father, who was watching her from across the table. "You like it?" he signed. "It's perfect," she replied. He smiled back. "You are my forever." 6 months later, a farewell and a beginning life, as it always does, began to move forward. The foundation grew internationally. Adrian traveled to schools and hospitals to advocate for deaf inclusion. Emily took charge of interpreter training programs. And Clara, she started her own art therapy initiative, using visual communication to heal children who had lost their voice through trauma or disability, but fate, gentle and cruel as it is, had one more test to give. Adrian's health began to decline again. It started with fatigue, then pain, then hospital visits. The doctor said his heart was failing, an aftermath of years of stress before his transformation. He hid it at first, not wanting to worry Clara, but she noticed. She always noticed. The last conversation, one quiet evening. Clara sat beside her father's bed, the room bathed in the golden light of sunset. The monitors beeped softly, steady but slow. He smiled faintly, raising his trembling hands. "Remember the first time we talked in sign language?" Clara nodded, tears forming. "At the gala, you called me broccoli," he laughed weakly. "Best mistake of my life." Out. They both smiled through tears. "I'm proud of you, Clara," he signed slowly. "You gave my silence meaning. You gave me a voice," she replied. He reached out, touching her cheek gently. "Don't ever stop painting. Don't ever stop listening." Her hands trembled. "You're not leaving me," he smiled. "I'll always be here. Every time you sign." "I'll see it," she sobbed, holding his hand tight. Unwilling to let go,